So what makes today Good Friday? That's the question. Well, it's a great story. It's the story it tells, the good story that it tells that makes it a great Good Friday. And the story that it tells is not just the story of the master teacher Jesus, it's the story of you, and it's the story of me too, and it's the story of every individualized expression of spirit. And the story is about an individual who has chosen to live a conscious, deliberate, directed, present to life without ever faltering from that choice that was made. To live that conscious, deliberate, directional, purposeful life. And in the process of making that decision to be faced with human uncertainty, you and I, every one of us, is faced with human uncertainty. And within that human uncertainty, to stay grounded in the divine decision that is made and chosen to be conscious, to be present, to be deliberate, to be directional, and not to fall or falter when human uncertainty overtakes us on our road, the road that we've chosen to travel. Not to be at all stopped or blocked by that, but to be okay with it for a companion for a length of time, because everything has its time and everything has its season, and we will be seasonal in what happens to us in our lives. But here is a life that shows us how to overcome and how to triumph in spite of uncertainties and in spite of a human nature that it gets scared and frightened and so on. And understand this, that the ego is not always our amigo, as I read on a t-shirt recently. Your ego is not always your amigo. So that's something for us all to be okay with. You see, the thing is not to resist that, or not to condemn that, or not to judge that, but to see it like it is. It gets frightened, it gets scared, it's full of doubt, it's always niggly, mostly. It's rare when it's settled. But, and you and I have to get used to that. As the masters, all of them were used to that. And it didn't stop them. You see, on the path to life, it's not so much that we meet obstacles on the path of our life. The path is the obstacle. We're on the obstacle. The path is the obstacle. So you and I have to enter into that pathway, knowing it's the obstacle, and not be afraid of it or scared by it, but to deliberately and consciously and in the present moment go forward no matter what. Embrace the uncertainty and go forward in spite of it. That's the story, a Good Friday story. Because let me tell you, everything in the life of Jesus, the Christed one, was very deliberate. Very deliberate, very self-chosen. Not a shred of victimhood you find in that great man's story. Not the shred of victimhood at all in there. And he was belligerent even at times about it. He was stubborn about it at times. He was immovable about it at times. They said to him, "Are you crazy, man? You're going up to Jerusalem at the feast of the Passover, and you know they're out to get you, and they're just waiting for you to pounce on you and do away with you, and you're going to Jerusalem." And we are told his face was set on Jerusalem. There was no deterring him. That's where he was going, knowing full well what was ahead of him. But he knew more than that. Because you see, at that stage in his life, Jesus was not attached anymore to this bodily humanity that he was experiencing. And He was prepared for what might happen. And he was saying okay to it. Deliberately, consciously, very much present to it. And so off he sets, and we know the story. So the life of the master teacher Jesus is summed up in one thing and one thing alone, that he had realized himself at a very early stage. And the more and more he associated with the divinity of himself, less and less did the humanity of himself have any say in the matter of his life and living. So to the degree that he kept identifying with his divinity, the Father and I are one. He who sees me sees the Father. The more he was in that conscious awareness, the less concerned he was about the egoic self or the human self. And he had a profound and absolute trust in his source. In his source, he had a profound and absolute trust. And he was one with the will of his life. Not the Father out there somewhere's life, but his own life. He was one with the will of his own life, which is his divine life. Nobody was pulling his strings. Nobody was making him do anything. It was all self-chosen. So he was one with the will of his life, and he knew ultimately all of it would be just a drop in the bucket when what he was here to accomplish had been accomplished, you see. And so forward he went. I wouldn't even say courageously. I don't think he even needed courage. He was just so sure and certain about his well-being and the trust that he had in his bigger purpose, in his greater self. And the message then was, of course, as it went along, we could see why the play happened the way the play happened. Why? Two things. The demonstration of love in action, unconditional love in action, and the showing of the key to experiencing unconditional love, forgiveness. Forgiveness and love. Father, forgive them. They're clueless. They haven't a clue what they're doing. You have to forgive their ignorance. Father, forgive them. Now, the Father is the great self of himself right here where he is himself. That's the Father. So he's just saying that he could take from within himself that forgiveness from his own amazing grace, divine self, and forgive his detractors and murderers and persecutors and so on. And he did not see any difference between himself and those people who were killing him. He didn't see any difference between himself and those people except one. He was awakened. They were not yet. Yet. So here's the thing in that for you and for me. I'm telling us all right here and right now, if there's anything in our lives that's still unforgiven, it's a stoppage, it's a blockage, and it's keeping us on the road of our lives right here. And we're not going anywhere. We may be working very hard, moving very hard, but we are not going anywhere except deeper into a hole that we're digging ourselves. That's where we're going. And so, if there's anything left unresolved, if there's anything left that's unforgiven, there's no movement forward. I don't care how hard we may try, how many prayers we may pray, how many books we may fill with affirmations and gratitudes and everything else, we're going nowhere without that component being addressed and taken care of. So the question for you and for me today is, what do I need to forgive myself for? What haven't I forgiven myself for? Because it's all about me forgiving myself. Because as soon as I'm able to forgive myself, forgiving everybody else is easy. Very easy. Takes care of itself. So what am I not letting myself off the hook for? What am I still disappointed about? What am I still irritated about regarding myself? How am I still depreciating myself? How am I still clinging on to bitterness and resentment and shame and guilt? How much of that still moves around and has its way with me? Those are the questions that we get to ask ourselves today. Because until we can release ourselves from that resentment and that judgmentalism, oh my gosh, oh golly gee, this morning I was making my cup of tea, and guess what? Megyn Kelly was on the television interviewing a bishop and a rabbi. Now, for some reason, I just happened to catch that. Isn't that funny? For just some reason. I sat down on my chair, it clicked on, the television, and there this conversation was taking place. And at the very point when she was saying to the bishop, "We are a very judgmental group, we Catholics." "We are a very judgmental group, Your Excellency, Archbishop of New York. We're judging all over the place. We're judging ourselves and we're judging everybody else. And if we're judging ourselves, we can't help but judge everybody else." And I thought it was an interesting question. Well, I didn't listen to the rest of it because I wasn't there to listen to the rest of it in that moment. But I thought that was a very profound statement, because we are a very judgmental group, human beings in general. And maybe more of us than others, but certainly we're very. Because from the time we're knee-high to a grasshopper, if you grew up in Catholicism, you had to examine your conscience and judge yourself all the time. You're all the time judging yourself and everybody else as well. That is something that is ingrained in some of us, and we have to work diligently to release ourselves from that bad habit. "Judgment is mine, saith the law." The law will judge. Nobody else needs judge. You don't have to judge me. The law will. I don't have to judge you. The law will. And that's the only thing that you and I need concern ourselves with, how we will be judged by the law, not each other. How we judge each other doesn't matter a whit in the end. Doesn't really. But how the law judges us does. And the law judges us according to the way we think and feel and do. And so, the lesson for us on the Good Friday story is, if you really want to take your life seriously as far as spiritually unfolding is concerned, and being a real decent, honest-to-God truth student, then you got to cope with your area of forgiveness. Because until you do, you are not released to love and be loved. You are not redeemed from your own self. Your own self-depreciation. Because what depreciates us is our inability to forgive. And we're afraid to let ourselves off the hook, and consequently, everyone else too. Because it's all about us in the end. If I can't forgive myself, there's no way I can forgive anybody else. If I can't let myself off the hook, I can't let you off the hook. Because if I'm going to be reeled in, you're jolly well going to be reeled in too. And if I'm going to suffer, you're going to suffer too. And if I'm feeling this, you're going to feel it as well. So, the beautiful redemptive story of Good Friday is forgive and you shall be forgiven. Now here's the thing, God is not going to forgive you and me an iota. Forget about asking God for forgiveness. God cannot forgive us because God sees nothing to forgive. For God to be able to forgive, God would have to see wrongdoing, recognize wrongdoing. God cannot. God is whole, perfect, complete, unconditional and unconditioned love. It doesn't see any of that. So we need to forgive each other. I love the very challenging and the very difficult practice of Yom Kippur with our Jewish friends. every Yom Kippur, after a week of preparation, they get to come to temple, and they must. It's not optional. If you want to be a good Jew, forgive and be forgiven. It's not enough to go to some rabbi and say, I really ballaragged so-and-so, and I was spiteful about so-and-so, and I was backbiting so-and-so, and I was gossiping about so-and-so, and so on and so forth. And the rabbi will say, okay, don't tell me, go and tell them you're sorry. You have to tell them you're sorry, not me. That's how you get your redemption. So here's what I'm going to ask us all to do today, to learn from that. I'm going to ask us all to be open to, in public, asking for forgiveness from each other. In public. I'm going to ask us in public to forgive each other. Are you on? Yes. Oh, thank God 3 of us are on. Thank God 3 of us have saved the day. Well, if you're on, you will repeat after me and you will sincerely mean it as I do. So close your eyes. This has been between you and your higher self now. Your higher self is calling you now into a profound, sacred, spiritual experience. And you are ready for it, and so am I, or we wouldn't be in this room together now. So repeat after me. I lovingly ask of anyone in this room and outside of this room forgiveness for anything I may have said, felt, or done that may have hurt. I now release the energy of profound love to find your heart and help to heal the hurt. And I willingly, sincerely mean what I say. And I'm knowing that if I have held or I'm holding anything against another, I release it now. And in the Christ energy, I go free of it. I am knowing for myself, and I am knowing for the other. Peace, harmony, and love. So help me God. And so it is. And so it is. Now you and I have achieved. Give yourselves a round of applause. Now let's hold that. Don't let us dissipate that. Let us stay with that and let that be so. Remember now, you have been forgiven and you have forgiven. You have let loose now something that can free the flow of love that your heart and your heart alone can give, and that the world is waiting for from you and you alone, because you are the only one can give your love. Nobody else can. So I see rivers of streaming love pouring out of hearts and minds in this room and going out there into the environment and filling up the environment with this wonderful vortex of love-filled energy that is raising and praising this thing called life. And so I leave you with this. Believe in yourself right now. Believe in yourself. Don't endeavor to get anybody else to believe in you. Believe in yourself. And others will believe in you because they will mirror back to you the energy that you're presenting. Believe in yourself because life believes in you. Life believes in you. I believe in you. Absolutely, I believe in you. I may not be the fullness and the allness of life, but I am one life, and that one life believes in you. And every life has power, the power of one. And it doesn't matter. It does not matter. Anything that has happened right until now, all of us could be made brand new in this moment, right here, right now. All of us are open and freshly, amazingly coming into the desire to live a conscious, deliberate, present, life-driven life. And we can. It's ours to experience and to express. We really and truly can do life and do it very, very well. But we've got to believe in ourselves. And instead of looking into the mirror of ego to define ourselves, let's look into the mirror of divinity that we are and behold the light and the wonder that is beaming back at us. Then you and I could have the same experience as James and John when they went up Mount Tabor with Jesus, and Jesus was glowing and flowing and radiating that light. And because they were looking into the mirror that he was, they became flowing and radiating light. And that's the way it works. When you look into the mirror of your divinity, that's how it is. That's who you are. That's what you are. And that's so what it is. Now and forevermore. Amen and alleluia.